No idea how to use Teams.
Okay, I think I'm just going to make a start, and if people join in, then more the merrier. But yeah, so good evening all, and thank you for Heather Worley. I'm a farm advisor for the Ribble Rivers Trust. This evening we're going to be talking about our Lancashire Woodland Connect project, alongside how the Ribble Rivers Trust helps to deliver woodlands that help us meet our water quality targets. The main speaker tonight will be our Senior Woodland Officer, Christina Graves. Myself and Catherine Oddy, the Senior Farm Advisor for the Trust, will be on hand for support and to help answer any questions you have. Just some general housekeeping before we begin. This session is being recorded, so if you do not wish to be seen, please keep your cameras off. As a general rule, we're going to ask you to keep your cameras off and yourself muted until the end of the presentation. Please can you enter all questions you have during the session into the chat function, which we can then have a discussion about at the end. And with that, I will pass over to Christina.
Right, hi everyone. Let me just share my screen a second. Right, does that all come up for everyone? Can we all see that?
Yeah.
Excellent. So, as Heather said, I'm Christina Graves. I'm Senior Woodland Officer at the Ribble Rivers Trust. And primarily we're going to be talking about Lancashire Woodland Connect and woodlands, and why as a Rivers Trust we're interested in woodlands. So we will cover the main threats facing our rivers and why woodlands are useful for addressing those threats, our Lancashire Woodland Connect campaign that we've launched, how we work to develop a woodland, how we would then work to deliver the plan as well. And finally, if we have time, we can go through a case study of a woodland that we've developed in the past. So starting off, the threats that are facing our rivers. So really none of our rivers in this country are in good ecological health, and agriculture is one of two kind of main culprits for that. Agriculture affects 62% of rivers in the UK, and that is primarily down to poor nutrient management and poor livestock management. So woodlands, they're great for, we talk about these 4 pillars of river conservation, water quality being one of them. So woodlands are, when they're designed correctly, are great at intercepting diffuse water pollution pathways, which are sources of pollution that you can't directly point to. So it's lots of small things that are adding up to create a bigger problem in the quality of the water that's entering the rivers. The design of a woodland, if it's riparian, is useful to exclude stock from watercourses as well, which reduces direct fecal matter input from the stock, but also reducing poaching that the stock's causing on the land, on the banks of the river. And trees are really good at anchoring soil in place. So where you see issues of soil erosion near watercourses, a woodland in that area will help to solve that problem. Water quantity is another of these 4 kind of key things to consider in river conservation, and woodlands are great for addressing that as well. If you look at a catchment scale, you can work out which subcatchments and smaller than that sort of stream catchments are kind of key to contributing to flooding downstream. Afforestation in those areas is particularly good for reducing that. It's a great NFM, natural flood management tool. So I mean, woodlands are when you plant the trees, the roots help to break up the soil, reducing compaction and therefore improving infiltration to the soils, which is one of the best water storage tools that we have on the land. Exclusion of stock increases the roughage of the land as well, which slows surface water flow across the land into the watercourse. The trees themselves need water to grow. They sap it up themselves. And after a woodland that's been planted grows to maturity, and through the life cycle of that woodland, branch fall or trees falling down, anything that goes into the stream has the potential to create a leaky dam, which again is a really great NFM tool that we have. Woodlands improve habitat quality as well, both in the river and around the river. They provide shade for watercourses once the canopy's got big enough, and water temperature is one of the biggest threats facing any ecology that's going on in the watercourse, particularly in the face of global warming, climate change. But also trees that are planted around watercourses have the ability to create or improve the diversity of habitat in the watercourse. So creating lots of little nooks and crannies for fish and macroinvertebrates to live in, and therefore kind of just bolstering the ecosystem in the watercourse. Habitat quantity is the last of the 4 pillars that I've been talking about, and the third, sorry. And by creating a woodland, you're creating a habitat type, and deciduous woodland in this country is a bat priority habitat, and planned correctly, the woodland can extend and expand existing habitat networks. So not just the addition of a new habitat type, you're actually increasing the value of the habitat types that there are there. And outside of that, actually, woodlands, we've found woodlands to be a really good tool for educating people, primarily school groups. They love coming out and planting a tree, but not just school groups, but community groups as well. That physical act of planting a tree in the landscape really allows people to invest in their environment and feel like they're making a difference, particularly with all the everything going on in the media at the moment about climate change and how the scale of what we need to do to address it. It's something that people can actually get out there and contribute to getting their hands dirty. Other benefits of woodlands outside of river conservation at all is improving the air quality for people. So PM 2.5 that I've noted here is one of the biggest one of the worst air pollutants for people. It's contributing to a large number of deaths now. So, and that primarily comes from vehicles. So around the big motorways, or in cities, PM 2.5 can really be a problem. So again, woodlands, a deciduous woodland is great for filtering out the air because of the surface area of the leaves. It's a great kind of platform for all the particulates to settle on, and you can see real differences where deciduous woodlands are planted in the air quality. Sequestering carbon as well, the hot topic. One of the best tools that we have that we can actively sequester further carbon from the atmosphere. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, improving soil health as well. The roots are, as a tree grows, the root network expands, and that's not only good for the soil structure, reducing compaction and improving aeration, but also the biodiversity of the soil as well. You really do see a lot more invertebrates in the soils under woodlands. And not just river conservation, but actually how do woodlands contribute to farming? A lot of the land that we work with is agricultural land. We as a Rivers Trust don't own any land. We don't have any anything that we have full control over, as it were. So it's trying to figure out how a woodland is going to fit into the landscape and support the current land use. So we've identified through lots of projects that you can really improve your livestock management with a well-designed woodland, and that really comes from understanding how the farm operates, how the farmer manages his livestock and what their goals are. So you can design a woodland to fit in around that. Forage for livestock once the trees are grown, hopefully, then it's quite good for that. Shelter for livestock as well. There's it's not just the wind, but also shade from the sun. If you look at a field on a sunny day and you'll see all of the livestock are hiding under a single tree, it improves the welfare of the livestock in that instance. And again, this comes down to woodland design. You can understanding the use of the land with the farmer, but fencing off marginal or awkward land. All woodland projects require fencing. All woodland projects on pasture land require fencing off. So it's sort of a two birds, one stone scenario in some circumstances. If there's some really awkward areas that it's quite hard to gather from, or just you can't mow. Woodlands are, as we're going forward, quite good for improving diversifying the farm business. There's a lot of money associated with woodlands now, and I will go into that later on in this presentation. More and more assurance schemes, and more than that, contracts are requiring woodlands or some sort of tree planting to be going on. So that there is space for woodlands in agriculture now, and it's trying to not convert the land, but try and create that balance between the two. So in response to all of that, we launched our Lancashire Woodland Connect campaign at the start of 2020. And what that is it's a campaign to plant 500 hectares of woodland over a decade across Lancashire, and the areas where the catchment extends out of Lancashire but falls into Lancashire, so reducing flooding, etc. in Lancashire. And if we're to do that, we would be improving 167 kilometres of rivers and streams, sequestering 160,000 tonnes of carbon, removing 63,000 kilos of particulate matter from the air, and going back to the outreach side of it, which is a real focus for us. It's getting 6,000 volunteers involved as a sort of target for us. We would want to have 5,000 children planting a tree across all different schools, and it would calculate up to 1,000 days of volunteer time, and that's again building those connections with people and nature. So how do we develop a woodland to meet all of those goals? The first question we always ask is, in fact, before we get to this question, it's, do you want a woodland? A woodland is a permanent feature on the landscape. Once it gets once you planted it and it's got past a 10-year period, it becomes subject to felling licence and the UKFS. And what that means is if you are to fell it, there is you're required to restock it. So once you've converted that land use to woodland, it's woodland then at that point. And then, so once you've explained that to the landowner, it's what's driving you to want a woodland and to actually, you know, branch out and make that change. So it could be for one of any of the reasons that I said before, whether it's to meet criteria in contractor assurance schemes, diversifying income, or sometimes in improving the environment, and often it's actually a combination of all three. We work with our farmers quite a lot to get this message out there. So they're kind of the people that we work with are aware of all of these benefits. And then once you've got that down, we as the Rivers Trust would go and assess the landscape and work out where a woodland would be most appropriate from an environmental perspective. So where it's going to be intercepting those diffuse water pollution pathways, where it's going to improve flooding downstream, or where it's going to expand or connect existing woodlands. And between those two things of where the farmer wants a woodland and where we would like a woodland, there is then compromise, negotiation, or often just an open discussion to try and tick as many boxes as possible, really. And then once we've got that, we then look to sort out how we're going to fund a woodland. Ultimately, the reason for the woodland has to come first for us. It's as I said, it's a permanent feature, so it's got to be something that fits everyone and is going to be useful to meeting everyone's goals. And then once we've got that, so you can then look at the funding that's available and work out which funding is going to be most suitable for the woodland design that you've put together. So we use DEFRA grants primarily to fund the capital works associated with a woodland. But also, and this is going more into the education and outreach of our programme, it's getting schools involved and working with people in more urban areas who may not have access to as much natural space as people in rural environments. So working with councils as well, and finding that public land that may not have the same environmental benefits, but will have those outreach benefits. And then finally, we want this to get the most uptake that it possibly can. So all of our time working with farmers is free to the farmer. So we seek corporate donations and partnerships to fund my time and my colleagues' time to enable all of this work to go ahead at very little cost to the farmer. Really, in the ideal situation, we'd come to an agreement on a design, and then 18 months later, once all of the delivery part of the project's done, that the landowner has a woodland and hasn't really had to lift much of a finger to do so. So the primary source of funding that we use at the moment is the English Woodland Creation Offer from the Forestry Commission. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's the first grant in a wave of public money for public good, and as such it makes it quite a lucrative grant for woodlands that are designed to benefit the public the most. So what it consists of is a capital grant, which covers your fencing, the trees, tree protection, and that is an £8,500 per hectare cap. it does cost about that much to plant a woodland, believe it or not, especially at some of the smaller scales with the marginal land that we're talking about targeting. And the benefit of this over the old woodland creation grant, before you get to the rest of it, is that the funding, or the capital grant payment, is pretty close to 100% capital cost. So, for example, under the old countryside stewardship scheme, you'd be looking at about £4.90 per metre for fencing, whereas under the UCO offer, it's closer to about £7.50. Excuse me. And then beyond that, you get a maintenance payment as well, which is £200 per hectare per year. And that's for 10 years following the planting, which just allows any trees that have failed to be replaced or tree guards to be removed. Excuse me. And then the exciting part of the grant is the additional payments, which are you can see here they're quite this is the lucrative part of the payment, really. This is why people are more and more excited to plant woodlands, and this is the public money for public goods bit. So all of these separate payments are associated with modelling, Forestry Commission modelling and Natural England, and you can have a look online on the land information search through the Forestry Commission at where these payments will be allocated. So if you design a woodland that hits all of those different areas, you can receive a payment of up to £8,000 per hectare, which it's a one-off single payment paid in year 3. But immediately you can see that previously under the old woodland creation grant offer, where you would have had a smaller capital grant from the maintenance payments, there's not much of a financial incentive in there for farmers or landowners to plant trees, but those additional payments are really pushing a lot of people over the threshold of, I'm interested in a woodland, but I can't figure out how to make it work, to actually, do you know what, now's the time to do it. And then after that, in line with that, I guess, the Woodland Carbon Code is the other side of it. So there's a lot of talk at the moment in the media about carbon sequestration, carbon emissions. And as these conversations are had more and more, businesses are becoming more, there's more and more pressure on them to be seen to be reducing their carbon footprint, kind of rightly so. So the Woodland Carbon Code is the UK standard for calculating how much carbon is being sequestered by a woodland, and then it's a platform that enables the transfer of carbon units between landowners and or tenant farmers and businesses. So you can sell those units as part of diversifying your farm business and increasing or creating a new income stream for yourself. But as I said earlier, more and more people are more and more farmers are being required to plant trees or sequester carbon or offset their own emissions. So having that calculation of how much carbon your project is sequestering will really enable people to make a decision on whether that carbon is going to be more beneficial in their own pocket to offset their own farm businesses' emissions, or look at the sale price of carbon and go, actually, might be useful to have that income. That's not a decision we can necessarily make. We do try and discuss with the landowner what their goals are, what requirements they might be subject to, and can inform them. But we would never ever push anyone to either sell carbon or keep it themselves. That really ultimately has to be their own decision. And then we move on to how we can deliver woodlands. So the woodland delivery process, quite a good statistic, and this was a couple of years ago, so this figure might be out of date now. We calculated it costs about £15 to plant a tree. If you take all of the overheads of project design, start to finish, basically the process that our farmers will undertake, the cost of a single tree is £15. And that comes from designing woodlands to meet the requirements, not just for funding applications, but also the requirements of the farmer and our own ideas of what would be good in the environment. So trying to figure out how the woodland's going to meet as many targets as it possibly can. And actually more and more, going back to the UCO grants, it'll be looking at where the woodland is going to be most lucrative. And then beyond that, consulting with partners. It is a permanent change in the landscape, and we are not the only stakeholders who might see environmental benefit from planting trees there. The RSPB, Natural England, Yorkshire Dales National Park, or the Forest of Bowland AONB that we work within, they all have their own management plans. So it's trying to liaise with them as much as possible and see how the woodland would fit in with whatever their goals and targets are. We never want to work against anyone. It's got to be a group effort, and it's got to be a project that isn't going to detract from anybody else's conservation goals. Arranging fencing contractors. So we are, I said earlier, we want to make the woodland as easy a project as possible for the farmer, and we certainly don't want it to cost them very much. So if the cost of fencing is more than the grant, we do have funding ourselves to supplement that cost. But as such, we are a charity, so we do have our own procurement rules. So we have to go out and get the best value contractor that we can. So it's conducting site visits with them, making sure the quotes are like for like, and again, taking that burden off the farmer. Project monitoring as well. We're very much a data and evidence driven organisation. We have our own data sets as well as the national data sets for where woodlands are going to be most environmentally beneficial. But to make sure that they are in fact doing what we say that those woodlands are going to do, we try and get as much monitoring in before and after monitoring as well. So that'll be looking at water quality, soil, doing some soil samples. We've started bat surveying, and we're branching out into otter surveys as well to kind of just glean the benefits of the work that we're doing and trying to get tangible results. Tree procurement, more and more with this increased rhetoric around woodlands, there's a lot of demand for trees. So we liaise quite closely with tree nurseries. This is the Northern Real Farming Conference, so like we work with a lot of northern tree nurseries to make sure that we're going to be planting trees that are going to be suitable. All of our trees are locally sourced. But making sure that we've got access to them as well. This year was really quite difficult. There was a lot of competition for trees, and if you got in too late, there's a chance that you won't have been able to get hold of the trees that you need. And then finally, tree planting. It is quite an onerous task to plant 50 hectares of woodland every year across Lancashire. But our volunteers are brilliant, and the schools that we work with are very keen as well. And we have a great volunteer coordinator in our team who works to ensure that the volunteers are happy and safe, but ultimately doing all of the out sort of recruitment for volunteers, really, to make sure we get all our trees planted. So a small case study, just to kind of, that's a lot of information to take in. The first thing that we'll do, and Heather and Catherine, who are on the call, are our farm advisors, and they'll go out and do a farm visit at a pinpoint, which they will talk about. They've got a farm advice talk early next week, I believe. But they'll go out and do the initial visit with the farmer and get all of that information about what the farm's used for, what the farm goals are, and how we can help them to achieve what they need to achieve. And they'll put forward some recommendations for how that would happen. And part of those recommendations will be woodland. So they'll like scope out where woodland's going to be appropriate. And then after that, I'll go out and map it all, or get an idea for it myself, or my other woodland delivery officer colleague. This is one of our internal maps that we've got. So you can see there's a lot of wiggly lines and colours on that map, and essentially the wiggly lines they are overlaid over streams. You might not be able to see that too closely, but they highlight where water quality is worse than that upstream. So it starts upstream and then works its way downstream. So slightly upstream of that, the water quality will be a lot better. So you can identify these are the areas that are causing the problems from here all the way down. And then those grey shaded areas that are surrounding each of those coloured lines is the water catchment for that issue. So sorry, I should have said the different coloured areas here, and here. They all refer to slightly different factors affecting water quality, whether that's fecal matter input, sedimentation, water input, and then you can see the catchment of those points and work out, okay, if I put trees in this entire shaded area here, we will have done as much as we possibly can to improve the water quality in this section here. And that goes for all of this. And then these oranges and yellows are highlighting the surface flow paths and where sediment is being moved from the land into the watercourse. So there are other areas that we really want to target as well. So using a map like this, you can really start to pull together the environmental priorities on this land, and marry that as much as possible with what the farmers' priorities are. The third sort of desk study that we would do is to look at the any sort of sites that have ecological importance, and whether that's priority habitat, a sink, site of importance for nature conservation, a triple SI, whatever it is. Those data sets are open source and they are openly available through Magic. So we would always try and have a look at those and see who we're going to need to liaise with in order to not detract from any other conservation priorities. So then after all of that, we can formulate a woodland design. So you can see here I've mapped out some areas that would meet the farm priorities as well as environmental priorities. What you can't see on here is how it all fits in with other farm and land management things that are going on, but actually we did manage with this specific farm to get quite a big connecting corridor all the way down this brook here, so with a woodland at the top and a woodland at the bottom. So across the whole thing, it's an integrated plan on how we can deliver the best outcomes possible. Again, so going back, it's liaising with stakeholders at this particular farm. It was right on the border with Lancashire and Yorkshire, so we had both councils to deal with. It was outside of the Forest of Bowland and outside of the Yorkshire Dales, but because it was on the border of both Yorkshire and Lancashire, so the Dales wanted to come and have a look because it was fairly close. The Forest of Bowland, we got out there because we work closely with them as partners in general, and we have discussed with them about sort of grassland and peatland projects, and there were potential opportunities at this site to go down that road. The RSPB Natural England are interested in any priority habitats and trying to preserve those as much as possible, so they came out to the site, and it was funded through a woodland creation grant, so we were liaising with the Forestry Commission and the RPA as well. So lots of conversations had about a woodland. Finally, once we've done all of that, we can actually submit the grant application, and this had changed slightly from the original plan based on conversations we'd had with all of those partners. And then it goes into actually getting the woodland done. So arranging the capital works, the fencing to go in here, and then getting in and planting the trees with volunteers to actually bring the woodland to fruition. And now that the woodland's done, we are still involved with the farmer to sort out the capital claims and support them all the way through, basically going on, offering advice for any maintenance, etc. That is the end of my presentation. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free.
Hi, Christina.
Hi,
Could I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So yeah, I work with quite a few farmers, and particularly based actually in the uplands, up into Cumbria, and they're talking about woodlands obviously quite a lot, but a lot of them are concerned about what happens at the end of 10 years of funding. And is this actually a case? Is a long-term kind of funding streams for these being mapped out or thought through, or is it? I think a lot of them are concerned of transforming their land and then losing what it is they value at the moment about their land.
Yeah, so there aren't, after the 10 years are up, that is the end of the maintenance payments. It's then looking into what will the benefits of a woodland be once it's there. So it is kind of like looking at the accreditation schemes, or whether it's going to provide improved livestock handling or the carbon sequestration. If you're going to be required to do that, it's going to be a business decision rather than a direct, this is bringing money in decision, if that makes sense. It's still a financial improvement and improving the farm business, but in a slightly different way. It's not quite as straightforward as bottom line after the 10 years are up.
If I could just add on to that, under Elms there will be payments for existing fine woodland. I understand that it was released in the pilot this year. it does state in the pilot that it can't have already been funded through another scheme. So I'm not sure whether that might change in the future, but there's definitely scope for providing some sort of economic incentive to farmers for keeping woodlands where they are. So hopefully moving forward, elms might provide a solution for that. Any more questions?
I have another one. So, well, I'm here because I'm actually speaking to loads of farmers at the moment about woodlands, and I don't know much about the policy and kind of the mechanisms of support. A lot of people are interested in wood pasture, and I don't know, do you do much around that? And are there similar ecological benefits for wood pasture that will bring in funding?
Ecological benefits and environmental benefits, definitely. Funding wise, it is a little bit more tricky to I think you'd have to go back to the countryside stewardship model for that. Is that something you can talk about a bit, Heather? Or because I know that there is an option for it.
There are obviously discussions about, you know, key line or silver line pasture, agroforestry. It is out there and people are talking about it and implementing it more often. I don't think we've actually done anything in our catchments surrounding that yet. And definitely have made open discussions about it. But again, it's one of them things that it costs more money, obviously, because there's more fencing, because you're doing a one line and then you're having a break. And so it's not economically viable with the current funding that we have available for woodlands at the moment. Again, hopefully elms will provide the answers. Yeah.
I think it comes back to, again, the livestock management and what I was saying about the shade. It's not too excessive to say that's where all your animals are going to be. It's going to be under that single tree. So the more that you've got, the better off they are. And the grazing as well. You'll have grass, greener grass for longer for them.
Shall I wrap it up?
Yeah, it feels like the late session as everyone's going for dinner.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you for attending this evening. If you want to find out about any more the work that we do or any information about the trust, you can head on to our website. We will be hosting another meeting next week on the 22nd at 7 o'clock to talk more about the farm advice aspect of the trust, as well as an open discussion about the future of farm advice. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye.